Gdy przypominam sobie sławny Oświęcim. Well, the problem here is, you see, Polish does not lend itself to to short words, you know, that rhyme. It's quite difficult. So it took about 4 years for me to perform. It took about 40 years for me to find somebody to translate it into English. I finally got, after 38 years, got my grandson, which shows you that I did survive, of course. My grandson, who just graduated from NYU Music School, who is on TV quite often on YouTube. He's a specialist in bossa nova. He's quite a fabulous, pianist. He accompanies me normally. And he translated it. So let me give you a quick idea. Gdy przypominam sobie sławny Oświęcim, czułem się jak w grobie. You see, it rhymes. Widząc krematorium dym, błoto wzdłuż i wszerz, błotem szyja, błoto nogi też. Apel, Abstand, mixen up, that's German. To słyszałem wciąż, cały dzień kręciłem się jak wąż. Oświęcim, jak oknem ciebie, ile bliżej Oświęcim. Oświęcimy z Auschwitz in Polish. Gdy cię wspominam, to mnie gryzie Oświęcim, Oświęcim, taki właśnie jest ten rym. Za twe spanie i jedzenie, szlak na twoje pokolenie Oświęcim. Za te walki w buksach wszędzie Oświęcim. Niechaj ci ziemia lekką będzie Oświęcim, Oświęcim. Serce masz jak stal, gardzę tobą, mam do ciebie żal. Pom, pom. That's the Polish version of my song. I'm trying to find my grandson, finally translated it. Professor Servi here, who actually is the head of writing that book. Okay, in there that you will have this story. The big thing that changes my story with every other one, I'm sure you've heard or seen maybe Holocaust survivors, but my story is so completely different because I wound up with the 101st Airborne from February 1945, where I escaped from an SS train that was leading us to Austria. I was a prisoner, and the details are in the book. It's called One Voice, Two Lives. Anyway, let me try and give you a little bit of a picture. Most people live and remember their lives in chronological order, but I see my life more as two different lives. One before World War II and one after. The Holocaust and the life I experienced during the 6 years of the war, I keep in a guarded place in my mind. For many years, people would ask me how old I was. And believe it or not, I would always tell them 6 years less. And the reason for it is very, very simple. I did not count the years of the Holocaust. In fact, one of the first things I did when coming to the United States in 1946 was to have all the numbers that were tattooed on my arm removed, except for a shadow of the last number, which is a 6. that could be still seen on my forearm, so that I didn't have to explain the numbers. I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me. So believe it or not, living in the Bronx with one of my aunts who came here 50 years before, everybody kept on asking, what in the world is this number about? Believe it or not, I told them it was my telephone number. And some people believed it. It wasn't popular to talk about, Holocaust. After all, why would anyone want to remember any of those terrible memories? I admit I regret it now, really, and I wish that I didn't do it. Anyway, next January, he got it. Oh boy, that Doug Survey professor found. Let me go back for a second, see if you can hold it for a minute. I'll give you the translation that my grandson, Avi, who could be seen on YouTube, by the way, he's a specialist, believe it or not, in bossa nova. How do you like that? And he's quite good. You could see him. He's quite a pianist. He just graduated, I told you, from NYU Music School, which is a toughie. Anyway, here is a song that he translated it into, and it's going to be published because they're doing a screenplay. It is such an unusual story. Here it is. I remember it so clearly. My days in Auschwitz, got out alive just nearly. You see, it rhymes. And still the name it stings. Still I see that place, enduring like the scars I can't erase. Appell, Abstand, mitten up, that's that German. Hear the sharp ears call. You wish you were just never born at all. Auschwitz. Through pain and sickness, always working Auschwitz. With death behind you, always lurking Auschwitz. Auschwitz. Evil like some twisted dream. Never mind the hope of fleeing. Hunger is the only being. Auschwitz. Like numbers on my arm, it lingers. Auschwitz. I curse you with my broken fingers. Auschwitz. Auschwitz. Heart is hard as stone. Hatred is the only greenest weed you've grown. Bum, bum. So he did quite a job, the kid, I'll tell you. Quite good. Anyway, back to my story. Next January, by the way, I did the singing of the 70th anniversary. It was on TV, and you could Google it in and see it. The memorial prayer, there were all kinds of kings, and there were thousands of people over in Auschwitz. I was invited to. In Auschwitz, almost froze to death. But it's January 27th when Auschwitz was liberated by the Russian army. Now please remember, I wasn't there at the time because I went on one of those death marches where the SS took me. I was quite healthy looking, to go to Austria to build bunkers for their Messerschmitts. I'm talking about January 1945. Please remember, the war was not over until May 7th, at which time I already was in Berchtesgaden. Anyway, next January will mark the 74th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Russian army. When I consider that, I sometimes feel it's beyond my ability to fully express or comprehend what happened to me in those 6 years of World War II. I will try to the best of my ability to convey and describe my life as prisoner number 83526 in Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. I never left it. where I lived for over 2.5 years. Again, longevity in Auschwitz was about a month. Remember that. I was there over 2.5 years, entertaining some of the SS and their drunken parties. And by the way, too bad I don't have any time to sing you a song that I do in German. I speak, read and write German. And it was just unbelievable. Man muss ja Klavier spielen können, wer Klavier spielt, het Glück bei den Frauen. You have to learn how to play the piano, because if you do, you have luck with the girls. That's the song, believe it or not. That was very, very famous, and I knew it. First, you should know that there was a period before the war. One of my fondest memories is sitting on my father's shoulder. We lived in Warsaw, which is not a little town. It's quite a population of close to 1 million. I sat on my father's shoulders to hear Moshe Kusevitsky, who was perhaps the greatest tenor of the time, performing Luci van der Stelle, which is an aria from Tosca that I learned at the age of 9.5, and I still do it. Thank God my voice is still holding out. Anyway, my family was sort of well off. The majority of the people in Warsaw, believe it or not, or the majority of that population was barely eke out a living, really. Contrary to all the stories that you hear that the Jews were rich, the 90% of them were poor, absolutely poor. My father was a carpenter, and that played quite a trick later. Anyway, it seems I was always singing, destined, I was convinced, to be the next great opera star. I sang on Polish radio with an orchestra. Ironically enough, a song called, in Polish, was famous, Zapomnij, which means forget. A precocious young man, I even had girlfriends, or maybe what you might call today, groupies, you know. Shortly after becoming a bar mitzvah in 1939, you see, I was born Jewish. I had no choice. And I learned, you know, some of you kids sitting up front might be complaining you have to learn a different language. Well, I've got news for you, like Spanish or French or whatever. Well, let me tell you, in grade school, I went to a private school, and every single subject I learned, I had to learn in 2 languages. 2 languages. What are they? Or what were they? Polish, of course, which is my native tongue. I speak, read, and write it, of course. And the second one was, believe it or not, Hebrew. Not Yiddish. Hebrew. That's the biblical tongue, and let me tell you, that is a toughie. It's got 22 letters, and can you picture multiplying a bet by a gimel? Tough, very tough. You're talking about different languages. Shortly after becoming that bar mitzvah, all came to an end. Not all at once, to be sure. After the invasion of Poland, the German army, of course, had it all organized quite well. Deftly organized, but organized nevertheless. They were very strategic to gradually and systematically strip us of our rights, our belongings, our citizenship, and even, of course, our home. Strangely, we weren't sent to the Warsaw Ghetto in 1940. I was only 16 years old. But cramming nearly 700,000 souls into an area of a few square blocks really took its toll. I was 16 when I became an orphan. discovering my freshly murdered family. My father, who was 41, my mother, who was 37, my younger brother, who was 2.5 years younger than I, where by premonition my father sent me out because he was a carpenter to clean the airport. A truck came in, he befriended one of the Luftwaffe officers. When I came home, I had nobody. I had a pile of corpses, and I still had trouble, and I could still feel it and could still see it. That was the end of my family. But of course, it's still tough. Out of the 1,500 people that eventually went to a ghetto in Germany through the courtesy of a Christian, righteous person who got me out of the Warsaw ghetto into a little suburb and finally into a German ghetto where I was picked with 1,500 people and sent to Auschwitz. Never heard of Auschwitz in my life. When we got to Auschwitz at the train station, there was a selection. I, speaking German, heard one of the SS men say to his officer, "Alle über 18 zum Lager." In other words, everybody over 18 to the camp. And something didn't sound right to me because the women and the children were put on trucks and sent. I know it's a sad story, and I know you've heard it many times before, but 980 people went directly to the only gas chamber that was built at that time in Birkenau. The rest, 500 and some, were tattooed. I, one of them, and I quickly moved myself over to the group that looked like they were working people, were capable of working. I was 16 and I learned quickly not to tell the truth, that I was born in 1926, which would have made me 2 years younger. I made certain that I was born in 1924, which at that time made me 18. Sorry, at that particular time, being 18 was a life finder, and as a matter of fact, I never changed, even when I came to the States and got into the 101st Airborne. And I do want to tell you about that because that's the funniest bit of this whole story. And that's my second life, and that became my family. 1945, fast forward, 1944 I should say, December. We are selected to go on a death march, Auschwitz being evacuated. I among 1,500 people. We arrive in Dachau. That was January 1945. Remember, the war was not over until May 7th, 1945. And this is February, right? The end of the Battle of the Bulge. We heard this story. We were selected, the group was selected to build bunkers. The question was who can carry 25 pounds or kilos of cement. And I was the first one to volunteer because I was only in Dachau for about a month. Not even that, about 3 weeks. From December through about January. I was the first to volunteer, and we went on this train ride towards Austria. We heard the story that some SS disguised themselves in American uniforms during the Battle of the Bulge. And while we knew it, we still wanted to get out of Dachau, because Dachau was just a death trap. There was no place to sleep, no place to eat. Just like Auschwitz was all planned Dachau was in trouble completely. So anyway, I was one to volunteer, and this is my point, my second life, that tells you in that book that Professor Servi wrote, Stockton University, how I escaped. I organized a group, we were caught, we were taken by train down towards Austria. Hitler was making his last stand at the Berchtesgaden. Well, after trying with a few other people to escape while we were being strafed by planes, you follow me, with stars on them. At first there were Russian red stars, but who the heck cared as long as it wasn't a swastika or a black cross, right? This time, leaving Dachau, we were strafed by American planes. They also had stars. They had stars, and as far as I was concerned, the star to me was Russian. And listen to this one. We arrived around Munich, past Munich, going towards Austria, around Zell am See, towards Austria. I tried escaping by myself. The details are in the book, and I made it. Okay? I made it one morning. About 4 or 5 days I'm hiding in barns, walking towards the fire. No compass, though I knew I was in Germany, but one fine beautiful morning I hear a roar of tanks. I look down from that hill after finding about 6 o'clock in the morning, finding a barn to stay for the day because I wouldn't dare walk during the day towards the fire. So, murder. I hear the roll of tanks, and can you imagine my first sign about a huge portion of tanks, trucks, Red Cross, all kinds of stuff. We're talking now about the end of February 1945. Remember, the war is not over until May. Okay? Believe it or not, you think I'm important talking to you people? That whole column stopped for me. I don't know if any of you ever saw that picture of that guy in Tiananmen Square, you know, with the hands up in front of that tank. That's about the picture, and that's what it's going to look like because they are in the process of doing a screenplay out of it. Out of the head tank, that whole column stopped. Out of the head tank, the hatch, comes out Captain James L. Walker from South Carolina. Now, I never heard such English in my life. You know, when you learn a language, I'm sure you people know. What do you learn? You learn a new language, you learn either the dirty words, face it, that's what you learn, or you learn words, you don't learn sentences. Captain Walker walks out of that tank. I walk over to him and says, "You Russian?" I saw the star. To me, it was Russian. He said, No, American." Well, yeah, man, but I never heard such English in my life. I couldn't understand a word he said. All I got was, "You escape." Yeah, he figured I had to escape. Well, what would a kid be doing? A kid of, 18 now, at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, on a highway in, in Germany. P.S. I became the formal interpreter of the 101st, put into a uniform, you'll see my picture in there, with thinking or learning how to use a Thompson machine gun. I still know how to take it apart. I asked the 101st group last year when I was here, I wanted to show this to the people, and the guy chased me away. It was very, very funny. P.S. I never left the 101st Airborne. That became my family until the end of the war. I am the first, and right after that, I was in charge of the storehouse of the PX in Versailles in France. I happen to speak French as well. So, the 101st 506 Parachute Infantry became my family. Never left them until I came to Hoboken, New Jersey. And I'll tell you, when I came to Hoboken, my mother had an older sister here who had been here, lived in the Bronx for about 50 years. When I heard her husband speak, well, I'll tell you what, I'm listening to it. My God, what language is he speaking? Well, anyway, this was it. The greatest thrill to me now is I am selected each year, thank God, to sing our national anthem at our gathering in Tampa, what do they call it? The frost, winter, what do they call it? The Snowbird Reunion. I got it. And if you want to hear me sing the national anthem, I sing it quite well. And I became not only 100% American, 101% American. And let me tell you something. I get sick and I feel horror when I see, some of our people desecrating the flag, or some of our people, complaining about America. Well, let me tell you something. I know what it means kissing the ground of the United States that the Pope does, in his trips for different reasons. I kissed the ground of America. I just unfortunately lost my wife after 69 years of marriage. And it's quite an education because I married a girl from Brooklyn, and her name, believe it or not, was Hope. So I had Hope for 69 years. And I have 4 children whom I'm very, very proud of. And this is it.